Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
We did not engage in conflict that was out of line with our mission.
Is it disloyalty? Is it sedition? Is it treason to oppose the hands of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. And good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. Another exciting day to take a breath and be thankful for our existence and participating in this change that we're experiencing. September looks to be lining up for a gigantic change month. So we're going to roll through a few things that are on tap here for September. First of all, bond market is spiking uncontrollably. Forward power prices across Europe are going to have to be forced back to parity with some sort of commodities. It's unsustainable for people to pay 15 or 20 times the pricing for their electric. There's no way even cities could pay this. As we come into more events on our planet here, railroad strike should be kicking off in America on the 16th. Got word today that 90% of the railroad workers are still in favor of striking. They went through the arbitration, the cool-off period, and that ends on the 16th. Lo and behold, the same day, the Chicago Board of Trade has to deliver the most ever contracts ever in the history of trading pledged for delivery, meaning they want the physical in their hand, and, well, they won't be able to get it if there's a railroad strike. Close the market. Now, coming into celestial events here, the night of the 22nd, which is the morning of the 23rd at like 3 a.m., I think it is, the autumn equinox occurs. And then on September 24th, we have the 50-year Jubilee for those of you that are believing in the Shemitah. And the 30th is the big granddaddy of it all. The Vatican says they need all gold, all silver, all antiques, all jewelry, all physical commodities of value, plus apparently fiat currencies out of the banks. I don't know what they're going to convert that to, but everything has to come back into the Vatican Bank by the 30th of September. Now, this is what's on tap for this month. And the way you look out at the landscape now, there's no way that Europe can afford the electrical prices. Oh, and by the way, the crop tour was done. I wanted to talk about that tonight. The Pro Farmer crop tour went through. USDA is about 9 to 11 bushels, let's say, off of their forecast. Pro Farmer found that their projections were way too high. But keep in mind, that's what's driving the corn price up. And it usually doesn't go up during the delivery time unless there's a cataclysm, and it's up and up and up. So food prices are going to go up, and then we get the delivery mechanisms and breakdowns in markets. And even cities now in France are saying we can't pay the electric bill, so we're not going to pay it, but you have to leave the electric on. And the power providers are like, well, sorry, we need to buy it on the open market. But you can see that there's unprecedented movement in futures contracts. So banks are actually pulling these power providers aside and saying, hey, you need to cash cover like about $3 billion as of this afternoon because the markets are moving too crazily. So there's all types of banking woes where these electrical companies can't cover the amount of money that they need to stay on the derivatives and futures market to sell electricity forward out into the market. So everywhere you look, this is, I do believe this is the month of the beginning of the collapse. So Ransom, I'd love to get your ideas. Ransom Godwin, 420 TV, Freedomist Films, jumping us into September 09 month, right? September should be 7 septillions, but who knows? Anyway, Ransom, glad you're here tonight. Thanks for joining.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing across the boards is all of that stuff we talked about in spring and last year shutting down. It's all shutting down. I mean, we talked about this ad nauseum, and I went through the comments on some of the videos on your channels of some of the shows we did, and there's people talking about, oh, it never happens. Well, it's happening now, right now. Winter of discontent is what they're calling it, and on several articles. Here's one from Breitbart: Germany to implement energy rationings among fears of gas riots. We got people lining up for coal, right?
I know, that's crazy. Hey, I talked to my neighbors originally from Poland. I'll tell you about his stories under communism, but keep going.
All right, so yeah, the Polish lining up for their rationing, and remember, I believe it was last year and more that you were using the word rationing for everything. You know, like we're going to see rationing. The real rationing comes at the end when it's food rationing, but you can see it setting up right now. People are freaking out. This happened last week actually. Air raids puzzling Swedish motorists. So you can kind of see that they're setting up for major events. Let me see here. I got kind of lost on my articles here.
There's so many to choose from, you know, it's easy to get lost. And before it was like three tabs open. Now it's like 16 tabs just for the record electrical pricing.
Yeah. It's just funny. Our government's kind of laughing on our faces as the NIH is now recommending ivermectin. And I'm not even going to say what for, because I know that they pulled a lot of rules off of YouTube, but I'm one of those people that they got to start self-censoring because they kept terminating me. But here I am. It's funny. Now they're telling people, you might want to look into ivermectin as a treatment. And that's not me saying that. That is the NIH saying that, and the CDC. It's just funny all the way across the board. And then they're, you got Crazy Joe talking about civil war and how half the country's extremist, and all of the leftist sites. That's the top thing they're talking about: civil war. It's now began on Fox and the other so-called right-leaning ones. So that is a they want that to happen, and it's not happening for them. So they're throwing little fits, but they kind of need that to happen because the rest of the world is doing their part of shutting down everything. We know that the Ukraine power plant that I think they seized it now, so I think the Russians have total control of that again. Again, meaning more. This is the second power plant that they've taken, so you can see the real war fighting over power right there. And then stuff like this, I've been going across. So petroleum I'm thinking about to skyrocket because here's the head of the Russian oil giant Lukoil, however they say it. He dies after, falling from a hospital window. I'm not even going to, I'm sure they have an official story for that. And then just crazy stuff across the board on oil. Like you saw Indiana, one of the refineries burned down. It's nuts. So it's just food and power.
I think he slipped on a chemically ripened banana peel, is what I think the explanation was. Yeah, I can't believe how many more food factory fires there were even since last week. There's been about 5. There's been 5. It's been 7 days since we had our last program. There have been 5 more food factory fires that have just obliterated the plant, where they have to close it because it's just melted steel down, and that's all you get is steel drippings on the bottom of where these plants used to be. So they're a total write-off. They'll never be fixed. Like anything that goes down in terms of fires or something like this, it's not going to come back at least for 10 years. Like where it stays now with the infrastructure is not even barely enough to keep the lights on and the doors open. So to rebuild an entire plant would take it'd take multiple years anyway, 3-4 years. But to bring all the infrastructure needed with every single part that you would need, not happening. So I look at it as like the liquidation of the planet has begun. And because of that liquidation, these things are going to start moving a little bit faster. And you can see it's purposeful. And I mean, there's no way not to see it now. So whatever's happening, with the Vatican pulling their money back, it just seems that a lot of people know, and it's a plan to collapse it on a certain set of days. And I've been looking at the planetary geometry, which I always talk about for 2024. And I thought it looked like the Kabbalah a little bit. But if you rewind the planetary geometry to September 30th, it looks exactly like the Kabbalah on the top. Got Aries outside of the square for the planets with the gas giants, and then in between there's Iris, and then coming out you got Mars and the Earth, and then you got the sun below that. So it looks very much like the Kabbalah, which is super interesting. So back in the day, I was looking at Talim's research on how he saw the Kabbalah, and it was actually disconnected, disassociated, dissected pieces that then fit together. So I'm thinking that the 30th of September is at least the top half or the top 2/3 of the Kabbalah. And as it disconnects and unjoins itself, there has to be a completion phase in there between now and 2024 of October. So I'm looking to see where the bottom would fit, just like it was where that Talim did. He was laying down in his van when he was living in his van at the time, didn't have much money, looking at the Kabbalah on the ceiling, and one day just hit him. It's a 3D riddle. So I'm thinking the same thing with the planetary geometry, because I've gone from now all the way out to 2025, looking to see if I could find that Kabbalah in the sky. I found at least one piece of it, and it's interesting. It matches on the 30th here when the Vatican's pulling back all their gold and silver to their holdings. Now, whatever is happening, I'm really looking at as an off-planet liquidation and settlement, forced reconciliation on this planet with whatever was in charge, or hands taking over and settling debts and clearing the ledger here on this planet farm that we're on. That's the way I'm seeing it at the moment. So if the beginning of it's in the September 30th, which is preceded just a week by the 50-year Jubilee and reset of debts, would it not make sense that that's the start of it? So where's the completion of it? Because then if you can know when the cycle's starting right now with a collapse cycle, you could prepare yourself to at least get some more silver while you got another couple weeks, or gold, or both, and hold on and get ready for purchasing something. And by doing that, helping others as you move forward. That people might lose their farms, their homes, or whatever, but if you could swoop in for a few ounces of silver and buy their farm and keep them on there, that'd be awesome. But somewhere there's got to be a completion to the cycle. So I don't know what that is yet, and that's after I'm done over the weekend here. I'm going to sit down for a few hours and run through from now to 2024 October and see if I can find that missing piece on those days, that if I plug those two together, it would be a perfect geometrical match with the Kabbalah. And then we know the start and the end date on the cycle of reset of monies. Now, other things might not be, but at least the reset of the money in the economic system will have a start and a finish date on it. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And let me tell you about my neighbor. He is from Poland, but he's older. He's in his mid-70s. And he grew up during the communist occupation period. And he came over the other day, and we were talking about the coal, as a matter of fact. And he told me at one time, Poland was like the most massive, unbelievable coal producer, where when he was a kid, he was like, man, there were just never-ending, massive, just endless cars of trains pulling as much coal out of Poland and taking it back to Russia as you could ever possibly believe. But he was also laughing because he's like, yeah, people in Poland burn was the second most coal in all of Europe. I didn't know that. He's like, yeah, in Poland, we used to be the number one coal burner for all of Europe, but not anymore. But here's the thing. People were pulling up with their cars and just saying, open the trunk. And I didn't know this, but I was laughing at it because he goes, yeah, people were putting down big plastic sheets in the back of their, if you got a 4-seat car, back seat, people were lining it with plastic and going, put coal in the back of my back seat too, just to get whatever they can to stay warm for the winter. Because they lived through all the communist garbage once in his life already. And he's like, But they never had a coal shortage then, because they were such a major coal exporter that nobody ever thought that coal would be hard to find. And it's just such an outlier for people to line up for miles and miles and miles to go get coal. But when he was a kid, you were drowning in it. So it's something very different is happening at the moment. I don't know, Ransom. I think there's got to be a beginning and end date to this. For sure.
Yeah, well, we talked about it before. Like, this is the dark winter, or the winter of discontent, as they're calling it over there in Germany. It's obvious at this point that they're totally shutting it down. I mean, we kept saying it was because of things that they were saying they were lining up for, but now they're actually turning the switches off. You can see that. I don't know how you couldn't see that. And so, here's a report here from MSN. Half cows, entire pigs. Families are buying meat in bulk to save money. Well, duh. I mean, we're about to go into that phase that what they call it, the Great Depression. I mean, that's the only thing that I think that Americans could compare it to, maybe in memory, because a lot of people had grandparents and things like that told them about the Depression. My grandmother grew up in the Depression. She didn't like it, so she saved every single thing that she could do. I remember my grandfather complaining sometimes that she would, buy things in bulk and things on sale, and she would prep, and she would, you know, pack her cupboards full of boxes, cans, and etc. every time they were on sale, even if it was stuff that they didn't even want to eat, like beets. And he would joke around about that they were going to go broke trying to save money because he didn't think nothing was ever going to happen. And thank God for them that they passed on before it happened. But here it's coming. Even in California, they're talking about power outages and how they're going to stop. At the same time as they're telling people that you're no longer going to be able to buy a gasoline-powered car in their state, they're also telling you that heat waves are going to crush the power grid, and they're going to have rolling blackouts because of shortages of energy. Please don't charge your electric cars, though. So what they're telling you is stay home. And I think that COVID was literally on accident or on purpose, however you view things, a way to get us prepared for shutdowns. And a lot of people talked about the climate shutdowns. Well, how about just war and famine? How about just war and famine? And it's your fault that there's no hurricanes. It's your fault that there's too many hurricanes. It's your fault that it's hot. It's your fault that it's cold. So the only answer to that is mass reduction of, the resources. And people joke around about, getting resources, this and that. But the main resource that all governments have in the world and always has been is manpower, people. And when they decide that it's no longer a resource, they reduce it, just like any farmer, rancher, or anybody else can, think that they're at a loss and just cut ties with something and go ahead and cull a herd that maybe they think has a disease or whatever the case is. It's a cost efficiency for their idea of them running things. And that's what I see across the board. They're just shutting down the power. They're going to get people so angry, antsy, and hungry that why not go to war for any war around the world? You can pick one. You can see over in Taiwan and China, they're starting to play games with each other, sending drones back and forth and shooting them down and things like that. So it won't be long before you see a hot war in the South China Sea there. And I don't know what that means for the United States, because here at home, we're trying to produce a civil war and trying to convince Americans that they should hate the other half of Americans. Meanwhile, the food's getting cut off, the power's getting cut off, the farmers aren't growing what they should. The corporate farming industry is not doing good. I know you know that because I've been watching your channel, just talking about everything across the board that you can think of is reducing as far as output and exponentially going up in cost. And I forgot where I saw it. Yeah, here it is. Famed investor Jeremy Grantham sees supermarket tragedy when super bubble burst. Well, when do you think that's going to happen? Maybe when the fiat dollar collapses? Sometime soon, I would think. I think that's why you saw the move from the Vatican to pull their money and try to, liquidate their assets and see what's going on, because they're not going to disappear. That they're a two-time empire player that's been there since the Roman Empire.
Yeah, look at the institutions that have been around since the last at least two great resets. Going back through history, I'm wondering how much of the history was experienced as exactly this same chaos and purposeful shutdown of everything to create this liquidation of all assets on planet Earth. Because there's only some point where you can come to owning all the money. And this is one thing I never really got. Was all the elites, okay, they're playing their chessboard and they're playing their Monopoly games to acquire every last dollar, every last square inch of real estate, every last ounce of gold on the planet. Okay, and then they have that. And then, see, that's what I didn't get is the and then. Because if you look at money as an exchange of energy and energy represented as money or vice versa, then you get into different realms of harvesting energies for creating vibratory chaos energies that other things can feed off of. And that would be the true tradable, the true value, the true commodity would be the vibration that you could put off the humans as a quantifiable. And it gets a little weird at that point when you start going down that road of thinking. So things have been set up to keep humanity in this constant need to go to work and, doing things that are not pleasurable to make this thing called money that could be seized, taken away. And there's almost all these problems that you can think of associated with money around it. It causes a lot of stress globally. So humans were being farmed on the energy level at that, what you consider everyday existence. Go back to like 2015, 2010, long before any of this chaos. There was still a lot of weird vibrations going on with humanity just on the daily because we had to earn money, which is we had to earn energy. We had to change our energy to get those papers to buy something like the house and to eat. Well, serfs also and slaves used to have a house and something to eat provided by the owner or the slave master. Now you had to do it yourself, but the slave masters were the central banks. That's one set of energies. Now, set up a world and then collapse that, you would get a different set of energies out of the sheer, unbelievable unknowns and just sadness and just fright and all these different kind of weird heightened, excited emotions, but on the lower vibratory realms. Like if you were going to harvest that as a crop itself, you would have set up these conditions. So perhaps this is a once in a 400 or once in a 2,000 year harvest that comes up. Because I keep watching that movie, Jupiter Ascending, and they had that entire what you would consider youth serum that they had harvested off planet Earth, and it was being used by the elite on Jupiter, who controlled this as just a farm on the planet. Now take that from a liquid format into an energy format, and you're talking about the same exact thing. So as we come up into this September crash here, the beginning of it, think about the vibratory response of the human, what they're going to put out, and how that could be harvested, collected, deposited, and then used. So whether it be gold and silver and all forms of assets coming back to the Vatican before the end of the 30th. That's physical gold in a vibratory form and an atomic form that binds itself, and you see the square brick in front of you. Well, what it is 8 billion people in chaos and fear and anger and seething vibration. Like, how can that be quantified and brought into something that you could see in front of your hands? You literally can't. It's on an interdimensional realm at that point. And I'm really wondering how many of these resets have been done on purpose. Because looking at a lot of maps, especially in the Sahel, I'm going to be talking about this on Mike Adams' program tomorrow, because I'm back in the studio tomorrow. From 2 to 3 p.m. on Brighteon TV. I'll be there live tomorrow. But I'm going into North Africa because the Libyans had been farming the desert before the U.S. blew up all their waterworks projects. They were tapping the Nubian sandstone aquifer, and they had mass irrigation and crop growing going on with tests all over the place. And even if you go on Google Earth and you go down and you start clicking on those little dots where it shows you the photos about central and west there, it's all just oases and just massive fields of crops, all that stuff on Google Earth. So when you go down a little further, and I was really trying to dig into this, what's going on? Well, the new crop growing zone is going to shift there. Well, it didn't take me long looking for image searches to stumble into these maps from the 1500s showing massive lakes and rivers and what we were told was desert. You know, these cartographers were put to death if they had faked or given false information. That was penalty of death, cartographers. They were solid. I believe their information from a 14th century map or 13th century map, 1500s, 1400s, 1300s AD. I would believe a map from those guys before any damn history book that we have written in a library. because history is so easily contorted and twisted. Now switch this back to that lengthy thing I'm talking about here of harvesting the energies in different ways, atomical energy or resonant energies, both. Because you can almost see that resonant energy from a human getting siphoned off into some sort of bottle and then a cap put on it and that bottle being taken up somewhere. Jupiter, for example, and they open it up and they sniff it in, and that's like an elixir or something for them of this, low vibratory state energies on Earth, but really at the uber state of terror. These maps I keep finding again and again and again from the 1300s, 1400s, and 1500s show all of that area from Libya all the way over to Mauritania, that whole area of Western Africa and that center, which is like a bone-dry desert now. Running rivers and massive lakes, all connected by different sets of rivers. And then if you go to the Empire of Ghana, 600 AD to approximately 1200 AD, you'll find the trade routes were running along these same exact rivers. And you wonder why they collapsed at that point. Let me think. So I'm wondering, just on the history of what we know from maps on how things have been misrepresented in the historical timelines, how quickly this or how often this reset is done on us to harvest the energy out of us. I know it's a little woo-woo, Ransom, but I'm going to go there because I really think we're at the cusp of something very interplanetary here at the moment.
Well, let's think about that for a second, because while you were talking about that, I'm kind of I was making a list over here. Say that for religious reasons, for biological reasons, or for some kind of weird power reasons, you actually did want to harness thinking, emotions, vibratory existence of life on Earth. And we consider ourselves the apex of the emotional spectrum, we think. I mean, I don't know how we could know that. But anyway, let's go there. Congress admits UFOs, not man-made, says threats increasingly exponential. So that's out of Vice. Those guys. They anyway. The budget for Americans' intelligence services directs the Pentagon to focus its UFO investigation on those objects that they cannot identify. At the same time, it's acting like they're not doing that. But back to my point, it could be harnessing of that, or it could be even psychopaths, extraterrestrial or human. Let's just cover all the ground there. But if they enjoyed or fed off of, kind of like, you could even go down to something as simple as a psychic vampire personality, you would want to create an environment, and it might take some time to do that, of complete hell on earth. What would you want to do? You would want to promote the idea for a long time before it happened of fear of loss, and then you might want to promote the fear of your neighbor, the people across the street, or the people that don't vote like you, or the people in that state over there. Some fear of disease, and then you get fear of war, poverty, the fear of loss again, and ultimately the fear of death. And there's a lot of subjects that kind of talk about this, but whether it be any of those that I mentioned, forms of gathering energy, or the energy that they're taking, it would seem like at this time they're kind of setting up this feudalistic future for us. And the reason I use the word feudalistic, because whether it's extraterrestrials or just these creepy elite, you keep seeing these patterns in civilization that are new. Like, here's one, for example: unsocial distancing, nightclub bans staring without getting verbal consent, and hires safety officers in pink vests to police the revelers. But that's just kind of a minor idea of that. A lot of people that have gone to Bilderberg and things like that have been told, the workers in there, that none of the people that are visiting this meeting you can look at. Don't look at them. Don't make eye contact. You need to be fearful of it. So that gets down to the ultimate goal of this list. Say you might even have a machine that absorbs this energy. You might want to take these steps to amp up the energy to get it to its peak, kind of before you call it. And I know there's a lot of esoteric, dark, like stuff that where they talk about sacrifices of different things, and they use sigils, ceremonies, etc., to accomplish the same thing. But if you get off of the small scale and think about it on a global scale, you would have to set up a situation or something like that to get all of these factors done. Fear of your neighbors, fear of disease, fear of war, poverty, death, and the end. But ultimately, the fear of your masters. And your masters are the elite people that are pulling the strings right now, that I can guarantee you are not going to be affected by any plans laid by mice or men. They'll go awry. However, if they have some help of some other kind, maybe you're a interdimensional fan of this, which makes sense also because I've been reading a lot of articles about people getting voices in their heads and how that might be possible in an actual scientific way. Well, if you didn't notice, scientists in these weird deathy cults, and they use a lot of the iconography of the secret schools and esoteric stuff when they do their scientific stuff, like CERN, for example, they are literally trying to break through to another universe, or not another universe, another dimension. They've been trying this for years. Who knows if they have or haven't actually done this? And we know that particles sometimes even come into existence, into our plane of existence, and then disappear or go back wherever they're at. And then you kind of put it to the idea of the atomic bomb and the fact that Crowley, they had a whole sigil with Crowley at Trinity Site for whatever purposes. We weren't let in on that. A lot of people theorized they were trying to open up a gateway to another plane of existence or something like that. It seems like, whether it's real or not, the elite on this planet are setting up exactly that scenario where you go through those steps of, making you fear of everything. It's just fear of everything. Why not put a mask on? Why not stare at people? And then you could go down the extraterrestrial trip. If you had a extraterrestrial that may or may not have already been on Earth in the past, they view themselves as masters, or at least creators or gods. And they would want you to act accordingly. So I don't think that they would want a civilization that's has ideas of independent freedom, independent thought, freedom of choice, free will, and the ideas of growing their own food and protecting themselves. Instead, they would want a population of what they had in feudalistic times, with dirty, poor, diseased, fearful, a small little group of people to feed off of only what you need for pleasure or energy, and obviously it's not a positive energy that the world has been setting up for. It's negative. So yeah, to your point, maybe it's even opposite than what we've been thinking. Like a lot of people have been thinking that we're going towards a time set up to drain us of a specific energy, but maybe this planetary alignment, new magnetic fields, and our situation that we have coming up here when things are changing, maybe that's because they can't feed off of us anymore, and that's why they want to cull, control, gene edit, and create a new beginning.
Yeah, it would make sense if the actual source of that was going to change vibrationally, is because we are heading, and I firmly believe in the Vedic astrology and the Yuga cycle as showing the energies as we move through different quadrants of space. I'll take you back 200 years plus. If you went back to, say, 1700 or 1750, astrology and astronomy were the same science interblended. The astrology explained the vibratory frequency, or the energy increases of density, which meant hotter, warmer, faster vibrations, or cooler areas of space, denser plasma areas of space. That's what astrology explains, is that energy frequency moving through how it affects the day, the birth cycle, all these things. The astronomy explains your position in the heavens, so you can see that we're going to go through that heavy, dense plasma area again. Everything's going to get scattered, and everybody's going to behave like this until we pass through this area over multiple generations. Like, it's been mapped out for 25,000 years on how many times through each ice age cycle times how many ice age cycles going back millions of years. People have this knowledge. It's been around for a while. So I'm just unsure because if we're coming from the Yuga cycle out, we just exited the Kali Yuga, which is the lowest, they call it the iron vibration, the iron age. You know, you think how dense iron is or how dense uranium is. I picked up an old spent uranium thing from the 1940s those rocks are so incredibly heavy. You have no idea. You pick up a rock, you think you pick it up with your hand like one. No, you need two hands to pick up the rock. It's incredibly heavy. Density, that iron density is where we have exited out of. And as we go around the circle, we come up approximately, 6,000 years from now? There's a 12,500 year cycle. And we can manifest instantly. And this is where a lot of these old ancient megaliths might come from, is that time period 6,000 years from now, vibratory speaking, on the Yuga cycle going around its circle of life and circle of vibration, high vibration, low vibration. Perhaps a lot of these megaliths or that high vibration state where we can manifest instantly on the human realm, but imagine if 100 humans got together, what they could manifest instantly. So a lot of these, I do believe, ancient sites were built using mind. That's why we don't find a lot of the tools, because if you could do it and reconstitute minerals and different elements, for a better term, then you could just do that with your mind. You wouldn't need the tools. So the validity of ancient civilizations having better tech, they've brainwashed us to think that technology is only a computer, only a circuit board. They never really talk about the vibration frequency of humans raising up to, when you combine that with hundreds of other people, to be able to move, bend, and change physical matter. That level of technology is technology. But as we're coming out of this Yuga cycle right now, we've exited out of the Kali Yuga, and we are currently entering into what's called the Dwapara Yuga. And every day from now until we reach the top of the cycle in some 6,000 years from now, when we can manifest instantly, we are getting vibrationally stronger and higher vibration every single day from this point. Well, it has been like this for, about 30 years, exiting out of, and each day vibrationally lighter, vibrationally faster. So I do believe that the elite understand this same cycle, that we as a human species are going to be an uncontrollable vibrational food source any longer. Just strictly, I think the Iron Age is the only time they can encapsulate humanity and receive the energy from that. But again, you're talking about a long-term feeding cycle of some 12,500 years, and you get to capture humanity for 3,500 of that, or a quarter of those years, humanity is captured by these low vibration entities. But for the other 3/4 of the time, we're out of their visual spectral range because we're vibrating so fast. And you look at a bunch of these civilizations in the past that have just instantly disappeared. And there's been a fair few. The Mayans are the most famous, I guess. They just kind of disappeared. Some people will say drought. Others will say they just vanished in front of the eyes. Same with those on Easter Island. But a really good example is Sanxing Dui, which is out near Sichuan, or it's out near Chengdu in Sichuan province, about an hour and a half north of Chengdu. Vast empire, the highest of the high in technologies, and they're around for 1,200 years. And whoosh, they just disappeared too. So perhaps in this cycle of yugas, they're still there, but they're vibrating at a faster rate, and we can't see them because we're vibrating at too slow of a rate. And I'm wondering when these two worlds are going to cross over again. So when you start to see and hear things that you're just talking about, voices in people's heads, perhaps their vibrational state is increasing, where they're starting to cross into the next plane on the next higher step of vibrational frequency, where you actually see physical things in front of your eyes that just appear suddenly because your vibration state has gotten high enough to let that come into visual or either audible range. And I know we've talked about this a couple times, but keep in mind, everybody out there who's giving up hope, please don't. Because every day from this day forward, and has been for years now, it's vibrationally stronger. And I think the elite are desperate to try to pull us down like a great white grabbing your leg and pulling you back into the depths of the ocean, because it's the last chance they'll have to feed on humanity after this. We literally are in the last days. And, a lot of people might go, well, they interpret it wrong. What's the last days of the elite with these low vibration frequency strangleholds and chains on us? That's disappearing. The last days of that. But they've misinterpreted it to mean last days, and everybody's so fearful of some sort of Armageddon and everybody dies on the planet. Nope. The elite disappear out of our visual spectral range, and we can wave to them like licking off a hot air balloon. Later, skater. Oh, Soros, here, let me take a dump on you. Oh, sorry, it missed. Oh, good. FJB, right on the head, baby. So, you know what I mean? This is where it's going to be, raising out of the clouds, looking off. And I believe, Ransom, you got it, that somehow we're at that cusp where everything's being grabbed and pulled back because it's the very last chance they have to feed on us for another multiple 1,000-year cycle.
Yeah, well, even if it's not feeding on us in like a sense of draining us of pure energy, think about this. I mean, they want the scenario where at least the masters, like I was saying, fear of the masters, that's the ultimate new thing of this new age here, will be fear of the masters. It's like a feudalistic thing, but it reminds me of the Sumerian tales, and also the Bible, in which they talk about the Tower of Babel. And we're at that point now. Now, we're not talking about a literal tower for, the peasants, but think about it. We have hot water, we have internet, we have, luxury, unrivaled in human history, actually, for the basic peasant, like that lives in a house. They got, electricity, hot water, etc. They got a refrigerator, they got entertainment on demand. They really don't have to manually work anymore. So, the conditions for the first world, at least, have changed. And now it's kind of like when in those tales, they said, look at them. There's nothing that they can't do that we can do now. Let's get rid of them. I mean, it's at that point. So we need to be reduced back down. And I think that's why they pull these things, kind of in the public eye around the world. And it's just little things. It's incremental things until they get to the right point where they do their ceremony or action or whatever it is that initiates it. And these are just things, they admit that, there's UFOs. So they have that there ready anytime they want to use that in case, they can't get us down, basically. But these ideas about not staring at people, about wearing your mask, about staying home, it's all reminiscent of feudalistic times when like the king and the court and the lords and everybody, they had rights, but not everybody. So they could pretty much go through the land and take what they wanted and do what they wanted, and there was no repercussion to them because the people were just a resource. But here's an article that's talking about the Biden administration had weekly censorship meetings with social media giants to suppress information. So you can see they don't want you to look at them. They want you to cover your face and not have an identity, feel like you have no power, that you have no choices. And then they're going to manipulate everything that you see. And that goes all the way down to the local news that you watch. We all know that that's true. There's a famous video out where, they're all reading the same script in different counties and different jurisdictions all over the U.S., all saying the exact same message. And then you find out that the government is actively, and then there's the Smith-Mund Act or whatever it's called, allowing them to propagandize you. So it's not a question of whether they're manipulating you into the culling box, because basically it seems like they're getting ready to do us like cattle, which is, make everybody stay in one place until you die if you're sick, or die of depression, or die of malnutrition because there's a food shortage, or maybe you got mobbed, robbed, or stolen from, and there's increasing accounts of people just going around knocking out people, squatting in their home, lighting their stuff on fire. And then you look in the energy section, it's all things designed to make every individual on earth have a sense of fear, so that they can't produce their own energy and their own food and their own willpower to say no. And I think that, like you said, we're going into a time now where it's becoming impossible for them to manipulate us in the way that they want. And that's why it reminds me of those stories where they say, hey, look what they can do. They know things, they can find out stuff, they have instant access to information worldwide, or at least that's the way it was about 10 years ago. Actually, now the internet seems reduced. It's censored. There isn't as many sources of news anymore. You notice how that it didn't take them but a couple of less than a decade, I would think, to transform the world's greatest information tool that humankind has ever seen and reduce it to MSNBC and CNN and Fox and other things like that. I mean, the places that you would go to find out things are now considered criminal. The gray web, the dark web, the all of that stuff. And meanwhile, they do all of those things. They just don't want the public to, and that way they can corral everyone into a fear state of accepting new conditions on Earth, which is to wear your mask, stay home, don't look at your masters. You can no longer go down to the courthouse and say, hey, what are you guys doing with my this or that? Because you can't go in there. They're closed to the public because of whatever recent outbreak is going on or whatever reason they want. Maybe they're saying, and you look into the energy sector in Europe, they're telling everybody, turn off your thermostat. You need to not cool. You need to not heat. You can't take hot showers, blah, blah, blah. You have to do this at this time. And you can't use it at peak hours because the masters have designed a system and they need that energy, the only amount of energy that they're going to allow the world to have. So there's no question is if they're shutting us off. The question is why, and I think that's what it is that we're at a point where we're no longer controllable.
Yeah, and then you got to think of it as a farm. So I'll use Georgia chicken farms as an example. Sometimes there'll be a disease in one of the breeding or hen houses that they need to then cull all the animals. So what they do is they'll close all the windows and then they'll crank the heat and then add steam in there. And it's considered when you suffocate something with superheated steam coming in and they die that way, I don't think that's really like the most humane way to do it. But the USDA approves of that method. Pigs too. They'll just close all the ventilation off and they'll crank up the heat to as high as it can go and then they'll pump steam in there. And then everything obviously will suffocate or, expire from 160, 170 degree heat temperatures. But sometimes they're going to cull the entire flock, but then they want to save it for meat. So they'll do it in a little bit different way. So the way I'm looking at it now is what's going to be salvaged, from the planet, because they're not going to let everything go down in a firestorm because some of the infrastructure that's been laid out over the last years is still going to be needed. So I'm wondering how this controlled demolition is going to take place. Because, realistically thinking, if you had colonized a planet and had the workers get everything up and running for you to the state that you needed it, you wouldn't want the same workers to destroy everything on the way out now, would you? And also exiting, whether it be metals or mining or any type, who knows? We're always taught gold and silver is especially gold, is the metal to have. And through antiquity, it's been mined, but there's stories going back 400,000 years in Southern Africa that there were mining operations going on, but at a much higher technological level. You can look at Michael Tellinger's work on that. But then after that, what if the easy gains were taken, and then we have all the stories of the overthrow of the Anunnakis? They didn't want to stay here and work the mines themselves, even though they had lasers and anti-gravity technologies to separate rock after crush through lasers, etc. It's complicated, history is. So they created the Homo sapiens sapien to be the new worker on the planet. And for 400,000 years, we have been getting the hard to get at gold out of the ground. But I'm curious, what other elements would be wanted to take off the Earth here if you were going to come to another planet?
Water.
Yeah, you got it. That's another one.
I kind of had that rant, but there is some good news, out there. And one other point, and I thought this was funny. I was talking about all these steps that they do to kind of get you in the mindset of fear. You know that nowadays they can artificially produce this feeling. They have several technologies that can make someone feel like they're afraid, mess with their guts, which is where you get that fear feeling from. And then I thought this was funny and bizarre. COVID's latest bizarre side effect, restless anal syndrome. So basically, you have upset stomach, and you have that feeling in your stomach like you're nervous or you need to go drop a deuce. But back to the good point, with all of this weird stuff that's going on in culture, I was looking at this New York Post thing, and it was talking about all of these surveys they were taking, show that Generation Z is kind of over the pop culture hookup, and they're more wanting to move towards a conservative family type nuclear family. So maybe that's some good news that, the next couple of generations will be fighting on the earth to just be a family, because that's no longer the fad. And you can look, we're right at that point at whichever, couple of months, I think, was right before the Roman Empire just collapsed into nothing. And it wasn't a thing anymore. It rebranded itself and came back as the Vatican Church. And think about that. They became the people. Instead of telling you what to do at the point of a sword, they became the people that told you how and where you were going to live. And there was a lot of dark times with even the Catholic Church in charge of stuff, as far as murdering and destabilization and things. And they want that time again. And I don't just blame the Catholic Church, even though the Vatican does seem to be the new Roman Empire. They just, instead of with a sword, they've done it with banking and the fear of the afterlife, that they control it. And they have a lot of people, that no matter what they do that's wrong in the public, they will still follow them. And it's the same way for all of the other groups, like the political groups. Like there's Democrats out there that no matter what the Democrats do, they will always worship and follow the rules. And the Republicans are the same way. As long as their team or their guys in charge, we're willing to deal with hunger, rationing, being tracked, spied on all the time. And we're at that point. So we're no longer useful to the elite. I mean, what size workforce is there really in the world that actually does that physical labor that would be getting to those hard to reach places? It's not that many anymore. They've shut down everything. So they don't really need that many people to do it, because the population, when we were really starting to mine and come to in the Industrial Revolution, wasn't as large as it is now. And I think they want to just reduce it back then and reset who's in charge. And you pointed out something kind of spooky. You notice all these, go back to the CEOs that resigned and all of the politicians that quit, and the billionaires and the monarchy of the royal family saying that they're going to abdicate the throne soon and, kind of weasel off into the dark and disappear out of range, out of vibration with us, where we don't see their hidden hand anymore.
I have an answer for you. The number of people that are needed, if their population is reduced again, the number they would need is those people to do the work, but also reset so debt could expand again and they could start the entire system again. Because we've come to the point where there's no more debt expansion, so everything stops anyway. The system would collapse anyway, because it was a debt expansion system that has built up the world. Now, with that in full contraction, and I saw a report today, they're expecting a 95% drop, 90 to 95% drop in the bond market, the equities market, the futures markets, and the stock market, all coming up here as this collapse occurs. I was talking to a guy, but super big hitter, just like incredible amounts of wealth this guy has. But I was talking to him, and I was trying to say, yeah, pennies on the dollar, look at this thing. You're getting 95 cents to get something for a penny on the dollar. And he goes, I'm not meaning it. Do you even know what you're talking about? And of course I had to ask. No, I don't, obviously, if he asked me the question. And he's like, no, you're going to be picking things up for 1,000th of a cent on the dollar. That's how vast the reset's going to be in terms of monetary pullback. 1,000th of a cent on the dollar to purchase something. So get those silver bars in order. We'll be right back after the break. David DuByne and Ransom Godwin right here. See you in 2 and 2.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Are you interested in the paranormal, murder mystery, real natural law? You enjoy interviews with amazing guests? Then join Crypt Rick every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crypt Rick's I've been thinking. Welcome to the Crypt.
Join me at Revolution Radio, Studio B, at 11 a.m. on Saturday for Free Association, when we take a look at philosophy, spirituality, psychology, social issues, and geopolitics. It's every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Studio B at freedomslips.com.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio, Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Welcome back to the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. Listener supported indeed. If you're liking our conversation, as well as all the other hosts here on Revolution Radio, Studio A and B, consider a donation to keep running costs and production costs up so we can continue to bring information just like this. All the hours available for anybody to piece what is happening right now and how it will affect your life and your family's lives. You just have to tune in. But again, it costs money to keep the station up and running. So please consider a donation right up in the top left, freedomslips.com. Now, before we went on the break, we were talking about how much human labor would it be or would be required to have all the basics met where you could restart a society. And there's going to be a number with that, okay? We don't know what the number exactly is. But there also has to be a debt-based system for debt expansion with that number of people to restart a system so everything could grow again. And it would work by itself, but you still, if you control the central bank, it would maintain control of the system, even though it would organically grow to this point where we sit today, and now it's over. This month does believe, September, that it is over. The system we understand that will go into full collapse on purpose, and whatever energies or frequencies harvested out of that process will be a good that could be sold elsewhere. I'll leave it at that. But speaking of goods being sold, you know, this whole record electric prices in Europe. I watched this video yesterday. It was above my head. So I had to watch it like 6 or 8 times at least, you know, rewinding sentences. So like, wow, what was it? It was all about the futures pricing market of electricity in Europe at the moment. Now, this is the thing that's going to break the system. Now, food could be, but food pricing, it's going a little bit too slow. The radiation leak, if it were to occur from that one radiation or the nuclear power plant in Ukraine, if that were to leak and go over the crops that are about to be harvested in Europe, that would send world prices skyrocketing to the point where that would be a collapse for a part of a system too. So think about this, whatever that starts with a Z, I forget the name. If it leaked, it would blow west. But if it blows west, it's going to go over Czech Republic and German crop fields along. If it gets a swirl backward, it'll hit the Polish fields. If it goes a little further south, it'll go down into Romania and Bulgaria. Major crop producing areas. So imagine if it went south first, wiped out Bulgaria, popped back up, went Czech Republic and over to Germany, you would take all that instantly off the world market because it would be contaminated with radiation. You couldn't even sell it as animal feed. You have to you couldn't till it under either. You'd have to physically remove it and take it somewhere and burn it or whatever. I don't know how they would do that. That would be a game changer because next year those fields wouldn't be usable either. So you'd have to take that much off of world production in addition to the volcanic winter in the southern hemisphere, crop losses, and the fertilizer shortages because electricity is too expensive to produce fertilizer. So, two-pronged approach coming back in here. The high electrical prices are affecting everybody across Europe. So here's this is off Wall Street Silver. I know I like to follow them for the silver news and some of this type of article. Supermarkets in Rome are forced to turn off the lights due to a 500 or a 5x increase in the cost of their energy bills. Many have also turned off food refrigerators and are firing staff. So the futures market, anybody familiar with this on electricity? I mean, we understand it for buying corn into the future. Farmers try to protect themselves and say in case of a massive price rise. Well, the same thing is true with the electrical market. So those who are selling electricity into the market, when they built their hydroelectric dam, there was cost analysis on that thing for 50 or 100 years, and they had to have a certain minimum price and to pay back the loans and to be operational. And if it fell below that price, then the ROI on those projects just didn't match any longer. So to do the same thing that farmers do in case they get wiped out on corn or something, they're also able to hedge on the futures market in case the price goes down. They'll still make money, but be able to cover the loss of the product or non-availability of the product. So I was so totally unfamiliar with the electric futures market. That's what I'm saying. The video was far over my head. I just did more research on it, and I kind of understand. See, the thing that he grabbed my attention with was saying, this is the thing that's going to take down and cause the cascade of the markets. In 2008 and 9, it was the subprime mortgage crisis. Again, a lot of things were ushered in after that, but that seemed to be at that time the marker in time that in the future the economy was at its last legs. So the physical futures electricity market operates again in two forms. You have the people who produce the electricity, like the dam owners or a coal power plant, and then you have the wholesalers on that. And sometimes they're swapping and they're using others' lines going to your hydro facility and away again, or to your coal power plant and away again, because it can be consolidated and then sent elsewhere. So they're also hedging everything out to make sure that they have pricing stability in the electrical market. The problem is the prices are going up so fast right now. And the latest numbers I've seen is 15 to 18 times higher than it was a year ago. So banks are saying, yo, companies out there in the electrical generation space that have all hedged way too much risk. You all need to deposit $3 billion over here cash for a catastrophic failure. You need $2 billion. You're a medium-sized company. You need another $1 billion in here. So everybody across the electrical space in Europe is getting margin called literally right now for both forward movement and downward movement. If you're in that physical space at all, you are getting some sort of call to introduce new capital into your account to cover catastrophic moves, whether up or down. Now, this in itself is creating a huge problem because they don't have that much money. They're literally asking for billions in a single day from a company. Oh, you're hedged out way too much on, German December close. Now you got a ante up here with another, $3 billion to cover a loss in case it catastrophically drops or whatnot. They're asking absurd amounts of money, so much so that companies can't pay that. But that's the problem. They're the ones that are in the market providing the power. So now there's really no electricity pricing mechanism left in Europe. See, this is it. This is the collapse of the electric market in Europe, which is related to everything else. It provides all electricity for all homes, all businesses, all stoplights, all subways, all factories, all grocery stores. The electricity is provided to keep the continent running, and that is shutting down currently because it's becoming so expensive on the electric side, like the electrons running through the wire side. But also on the hedging side, these companies can't afford to pay it. So there's going to be what was termed as recalibrate with all physical markets. Whatever commodity it is, all paper markets are going to recalibrate. And this is where he's going to, man, gold and silver are going to start running. But these prices are going to recalibrate to physical gold and silver prices, repricing the entire market in terms of gold and silver directly. So say that, let me explain that in maybe an easier way to understand. The paper money we're using, like euros, rubles, dollars, is all in this market as well. But it can't pay for it anymore, and there's no more pricing left. So the collapse is going to come in the physical structure of all these paper contracts, derivatives. This is all going to crash, and it's going to have to be resettled with gold and physical silver because the fiat money can't do it anymore. And these derivative contracts that are out off of the initial hedging contracts also are at absurd levels. And anybody holding these derivative contracts, they don't even know where it finally ends because it's been sold off 99 times in baskets of assets that banks will, loan off against and insure, and that's a collateralized debt obligation. Cool, dude. I just insured it so then I can make money off the insurance, and it's so deep and goes so far that this cascading failure of the electric market across Europe will be the reset for the gold and physical silver. This is described as a little pyramid within a pyramid buckling. And those of you who followed the nickel debacle back, what was it, March? I'm pretty sure it was in March. The nickel market at the London Metals Exchange went from $3,000 to $125,000 in 2 weeks. Now think about that. $3,000 2 weeks ago, $125,000 2 weeks after. They had to suspend all the nickel trading. There was no more. Every contract was null and void. They even reversed contracts that were money makers because somebody had gone long on nickel and it spiked. If you were way out of the money call and you still hit that, they were saying, no, you can't. It was too distorted of a market. The money can't value anymore. And one thing I know for sure, because I know guys who trade copper out of Cyprus and a few others here in the States too that are on the commodities side of things in the rail deliveries. You can't. That was a complete wipeout. It is still, the London Metals Exchange has not recovered from that yet. And the electricity market is so much larger than the nickel market that the nickel market is really a fleck of dust. When comparing it to electrifying all of Europe so all business can occur and every home can have power and everything I just talked about, from the supermarkets to the stoplights to the entire society, every light will go out. That size of a market is nothing in comparison to the nickel market. And the nickel market nearly took down the global economy because so many contracts got blown out at that point where the banks were saying, you got to cover. And there was billionaires in China who were going to be wiped out completely, but that was going to set off a cascade of things as well. That would have wiped out Chinese businesses left, right, and center that were in the commodities market. So what they did is they just said, no, none of that trades counts anymore. Stop it all. We're going to reset it. We're saving the billionaires in China so China doesn't collapse. And any of you in the West that made a huge amount of money on this, everything's reversed. You don't get anything. We're reversing everything so nothing collapses. That's what they did in the nickel market. And this electricity market is thousands of times larger than the nickel market, and it's happening right now again. So you can't tell me that they're going to do the same thing across the planet and go, every gain made since this began has to be reversed and nobody gets anything out of it. None of the fiat will clear. No, all those trades that you made positive, we're taking it back out of your account and zeroing that again. Because that's what they did with the nickel market to save a Chinese billionaire. It saved two economies. But the electricity market is just far too large. And, there's story after story now. I mean, France is one to watch too. And I'm sorry, Ransom, I'm rambling a little bit here. But France they're at the point their cities can't afford any longer because the electricity prices went 5x in the last few weeks. So the city budgets can't cover the electrical costs for anything across the city at this point. Because the 5x is going to turn into a 10x. And that 10x is going to turn into a 20x. And we are in hyperinflation happening in real time in front of us in the electric market across Europe. So cities with their budgets are so blown out with the electric prices that they can't even operate for the rest of the year because no other service obligation can be met. They can't pay the firemen. No trash could be collected. No water upgrades or no maintenance crews for water breakage on the lines. No electrical crews in case cables are down. None of that. None of the money. There will be none left because the electricity has gotten so expensive that you either pay for the electric or every other service for the rest of the year doesn't exist in that town. And it's happening several different places across France. And you know what? The municipalities said, hey, sit and spin, babies. We're not paying your electric. We're the government town. You have to give it to us. It's a national emergency. You have to give us the power. Okay, I applaud them for saying that. But at the same time, in the reality of it, at these hyperinflationary prices doubling daily or weekly now, nobody's riding for free. They're going to cut off cities now. And who's going to pay for that electric anyway? So looking at what has happened in the last, 3 weeks when I really started to see all these electric prices jumping up. In the last 3 weeks, it's gone from like a 5x to a 20x. Especially in Germany. Keep your eyes on Germany and Belgium. And then now France because they're protesting and they're not going to pay. And England's not going to pay. They're not going to pay their bills. And it's going to be 70% more expensive than they thought for the electric price rises. Today's news. So wherever you're looking across Europe, this is it. So the reason I'm being long-winded on this is the event, the catalyst that's going to start the market crash, is what I'm trying to say in a long way here. So keep your focus, hyper-focused on this, because just like the subprime crisis, if you were watching that back in the day, you could see it happened, and that was the catalyst for everything else to collapse around it. Now, it didn't happen in real time. I mean, within a microsecond, or it happened over weeks. This one is going to happen over weeks, but it's going to make that crisis look like nothing. That'll look like, oh, Dad, can I borrow $1? And then he says, no, you don't need to pay it back. That's that compared to the multi-millions that are at stake. This is something, this is going to happen here in September. And, you know, when it gets cold too, and they're not able to heat homes, I tell you what, there's something coming that it's imploding, and this is they've already lit the fuse on this one. Sorry, Ransom, back to you. Ransom Godwin, 420 TV, Freedomist Films.
No, that was an in-depth explanation of it, and I was going to say pretty much the same thing in the other sectors. I was reading this article from Zero Hedge that's talking about, you know, how Russia is selling a bunch of gas to China, who's reselling it to Europe, who Russia is telling Europe they're going to cut them off, and they keep playing with them like they've cut off the gas lines before, just saying they're doing maintenance, and it's questionable whether they are or they aren't, or are they just turning it off to remind everybody that that's where a lot of their heating energy comes from in Europe. And then you see these other things. There's other articles talking about how Afghanistan and Iran are both going to start a trade with Russia as far as grains, energy, weapons, things like that. And then these other articles bartering up. Somebody in the chat said that you said something about Afghanistan trading raisins for oil to Russia. So I looked that up, and yeah, I'm seeing that. And they're talking about giving all of their minerals to Russia. And then you see the other articles talking about how Russia's doing deals with China, and then China resells it back at an expanded price. So obviously that system's not going to last very long. You're going to see countries lining up of whose side they're on these disputes. And then you got Macron, if I said his name right, there in France, talking about, you know, the times of plenty are over. You're going to have to deal with times of hardships. Not him, but, you know, everybody else. And it kind of makes you wonder if all of these systems are on the verge of collapse or may collapse now with the energy sectors and food and all of these other things. What do you think extra millions and millions and millions of migrants on top of those systems are going to do or not do for the system? So it's very convenient that these countries have been pushing to have mass migration come into the countries. And then when they're full of people, it looks like they're going to turn off the lights, the food, and everything. So you can see how that someone somewhere, I'm not saying Soros or any particular person or the World Economic Forum or Klaus Schwab or any of these people like that, but all of them together have this plan of destabilization so that they can reset everything. They want you to eat bugs. They want you to get used to a feudalist system, not look at them in the eye, and all of these other things. And they're putting out all of these different fear tactics. And in the real world, it seems like, new diseases are popping up or outbreaks of things. And you see the government already pushing towards lockdowns, masking, and et cetera over the flu season now. Several articles about that out. And then there's a strawberry flu where your kids can get all of these dots. They're worried about that. And then you got monkeypox, et cetera. They just bombard you with these things. And most of them you really don't have to worry about. They're just the same old cycles that we've always had of sickness and things, throughout winter, summer, etc. My entire life, there's always been people that were sick with the flu or cold or something like that. But now, it's looking like this is more of an engineered thing so that they can control the populace, along with the world lining up for a third world war, so they can decide who the top world government factions are going to be. And I think that they've already chosen that, and it's a communist capitalist system based on the Chinese system. But first, there's going to have to be, we've been talking about it for a while, just the things that they're doing are inevitably going to lead to crashes. So you can see that it's on purpose. And the whole green movement is a joke. I just saw an article. I'll try to find it again and put it up for the viewers. You think wind energy and all of these things are going to help you with the new systems they're putting up? No, they're falling apart. They're toxic. They have to get rid of them, rebuild them. And it's just a joke. And the idea that they're going to cover the earth with solar panels is also a joke, because we know it hails, there's tornadoes, dust, etc. These ideas just don't work for the world we live in, and only petroleum and coal and things like that do. And they've been steadily increasing the prices and shutting it down and making rules about why or where people can't use it. So I could see a war just over the idea of who's going to be able to use resources coming very soon. And when I say war, I mean on the low level of civilization, like your neighbors, the people in the city next to you. You know, people are going to be stealing, bartering, and all kinds of stuff. It's they're giving us a Mad Max world that's unnecessary. And it kind of makes you wonder, is it just to do that for, like we were talking about before, for human energy purposes? Or is it that they really just want to reduce the planet so that they can be the owners of it? You know, Bill Gates and all of these other people, you couldn't imagine how much land and resources they have acquired. Some of them are bigger than nation states. They have bigger budgets than nation states, their companies do. The people are, you know, we're talking billions and billions and billions, and they have projects that are trillions of dollars in motion in all of the little different districts, countries, and nation states, all leading to the same thing: shutting off energy and starving the people out. I mean, I don't see how you could come to another outcome than that.
Wow. You got the crystal ball. I was going to talk about this tomorrow on Mike Adams' show. And listen, me and Ransom we don't talk before I mean, we talk, but we don't lay out a plan for the show. We just kind of hit it with the headlines and bounce off each other. But tomorrow with Mike Adams, what I'm going to be talking about is in North Africa. If you were to use that as a new crop growing zone, as Gaddafi did by using the underground water resources to put out thousands and thousands of square miles of crop rotation, the above ground water resources are increasing off the West African monsoon. And Gaddafi proved that you could tap that Nubian sandstone aquifer. And I think they had 4,000 cubic kilometers of water under just one reservoir. I think it was 12,000 cubic kilometers of water just under Libya. But the Nubian sandstone aquifer extends over through Tunisia and all the way to Morocco as well. And it goes down straight south into Chad. And then you come into all these other aquifer reservoirs throughout what we consider the Sahel in North Africa. Now, the proof of concept was there. But Gaddafi started growing all this food out in the desert and wanted oil to be paid for in gold and going off the U.S. standard. And U.S. went in with Hillary Clinton right there. What did they bomb first? The water irrigation projects, the big canals. They destroyed all of that. Now, what's your military purpose for destroying a water canal that's in the middle of the desert, feeding thousands of square kilometers of crops being grown in the desert? You're cutting off the food source, you know? That's called a war crime in most places. But the proof of concept was there. Now, fast forward to this grand solar minimum. Now, we're going to start to see a lot of electromagnetic effects, things on the Earth's crust moving. And this also has me wondering, since there is a lot more movement in the crust, is the supply chain breakdown excuse because of what's happening naturally? Bridges being pulled apart off their banks, railroad tracks snapping, conduits being torn as the Earth moves 50 feet. Whatever, you're getting a lot of sinkholes, and you're seeing all this kind of news all over the place of unexpected landslides like you're talking about, but they occur in a neighborhood and they'll take houses with them. Now, there's infrastructure within this. We got electric cabling, water cabling, like I say, rail lines, the locks, the dams, you got the bridges. This is going to start getting ripped apart at the seams as we come in closer into this 2024 second electromagnetic field in our solar system. So I'm wondering if there's a lot of damage already and it's just being explained, and that would be part of the lockdown so you don't travel, so you're not able to get out to see all the damage. I'm looking at it from a few different angles, but here's the one that is the kicker, that we are losing crop production in the Northern Hemisphere. As this grand solar minimum intensifies, everything from 45 degrees north and above, I'm talking up into Canada, is going to be very, very low yield, if any at all. So if you know that, over these cycles, every 400 years, we come into this period where low solar activity moves the jet streams in the cloud cells, and there's a lot more extreme storms in terms on the cold side. The winter lasts longer, the spring is shorter, and the fall is much longer, and they descend into winter much faster. And then on an average basis, it'd be like 2 to 3 degrees cooling in a grand solar minimum. We're in one of these now. Take a look at the ice increases on Greenland over the last week. It's unbelievable, astounding. The most ice ever gained, ever recorded on Greenland just in this last week. And the Southern Hemisphere with looks like a year without a summer mini version. See, but that's only going to be a few years until the ash comes out of the atmosphere. What I'm talking about is setting up a new growing zone in those same areas that Gaddafi had proved proof of concept, but now taking it through the Sahel, all of North Africa, and roll that over into the Middle East, and you have a grow zone that is bigger than the United States and Canada combined, and you could get 2 grow seasons out of it because it's in that warm, hot, temperate climate. Your plants want to get water at the roots. They don't care too much if it's hot up top. They love sunlight for photosynthesis. So you think about putting vast crop growing area from the sea all the way in Mauritania and bring it all the way over to the Red Sea. That whole area of North Africa, one vast, gigantic crop growing zone. Now you think going out to Kansas or Oklahoma, standing there looking at endless, or Iowa, endless fields of corn, you would be looking at an endless continent from one side of the continent to the other as just one solid crop growing zone. Problem is, there were all these fighting age men there in these places like Chad that were war torn, had grown up through civil wars their entire lives. Nigeria, Somalia, these whole areas of the Sudan. Any of these ring a bell on just how hardened of battle fighters these people are? That is a standing army that would be resistance from day one. They've never liked colonialists, and colonialists have taken advantage of Africa for so long that if it was going to be tried again, it would be super unsuccessful from day one, because we have the internet now and everybody knows what happened in history. So this time it can't be done like that. Can't be done like it was in the 1800s. Can't be done like that anymore. So if you're going to come in and you're going to take all that area and turn it into the world's largest crop growing zone, and then you could centralize production, then you could control all production from the centralized area, and it would still be enough to feed probably a good half the world's population, because you could double rotate it. But then if you could control it all in one area, like no food's allowed to be grown outside this area because we control all the food production from the corn to the wheat or whatever in that area. So everything else would cease around the world for crop production because it's all grown in one area, at least in the transition phase. Problem is, there's all these fighting age guys sitting around all these countries. Until now, and Ransom, you hit it on the head. You get all the guys out through migration. You send them up to North Europe, right route. It's going to be the ultimate cull. You send them all the way. The standing army of 10 million men that was going to resist the takeover for all these countries that will be earmarked as the new grow zone. They're all gone. They're up in Europe. Millions and millions and millions and millions of what will be a standing army. Will be no resistance going into Northern Africa and the Sahel to grow crops. They're all up there, and imagine in this nefarious way that the elitists look like they can pull the plug and kill 4 times as many people because they directed them all into the same cities. Like these electric prices, they're in Paris. They're not coming back to Algeria or down into southern Chad again. That's a one-way ticket. But you think about how many levels deep that was to even figure. Who would have planned this? Like, I can see what has happened, so I can come back to say, all right, this happened. But for me to sit down here as a strategic planner and plan that out, you're talking about some super genius level stuff here. And I'm talking in just a thought way on how hyper intelligent it would be to actually put this plan out there and then have it over 100 years take motion until what we see right now, or even if they decided this 20 years ago, to put it in motion with that much resource on the planet. But who even planned it out? I mean, that's so ridiculous to even, that's so many levels deep to try to think how many cogs in the wheel would need to come down at the same time. Depopulate Africa, I mean, with the men, remove them out through immigration so there's no resistance fighter force. Understand where the new grow zone's going. Understand all these cycles within the grand solar minimum schemes and the 4,000-year cooling cycles. Get all these people up into Europe so then the coal could be twice as effective. It's like, putting people in gas chambers. If you could squeeze 2 times more people in there and make the gas twice as deadly, you're looking like, whoa. That's exactly what's happening. They're all being pulled up there and pushed into this collapse zone right now, just as they're going into winter. And oh my, does it get cold. So you can have all these, refugee help groups all you want, but they're not going to be able to pull all those millions of people out of there and get them back to a warm place in this winter. And if the electricity really does go down and they can't heat, just how many of that particular demographic will freeze to death? So many, because they're never used to the warmth. Germans, they're gonna ride it out, but they're gonna be cold, but they're gonna ride it out. They've been cold before, they understand. But bringing somebody from southern Chad in their first winter into Europe, and then they go without heat, they die for sure. So, yeah, that's how I'm going to put that together tomorrow in a different way. I'm going to try to put some graphics with it and stuff. But see, they're going to pull the plug on all the people at the same time. But they had to remove the African resistor force, so now they're called African migrants.
Yeah, we kind of talked about how this new growth zone or alignment of stuff is on a certain line around the Earth.
Yeah, still have that open on my Google Earth from last time we spoke. That's right? What I'm saying. I looked at those pictures in Libya today because it's on that line too when you come across.
Yeah, so we know that area over here in the Americas, the Yucatan Peninsula up through southern Mexico, there was periodically a great grow zone and place where they made lots of food, but then every so often, like you alluded to earlier, people's disappeared from that area because the weather changed and things didn't grow right and people starved in war and whatever other reason. But if you think about the really sinister idea that someone could do, I'm not going to say that they wrote books about it and things called like Cloward and Piven and stuff like that. But if you could, make a mousetrap instead of going in and just occupying countries, which obviously hasn't worked for Russia or the United States or China in the past, or Japan or whatever you want to look at, occupation doesn't last very long because of insurgency. People are fighting for their home. But if you reverse the idea and use psychology and propaganda, it wouldn't be hard to set up a mousetrap, so to speak. And I wanted to kind of get into that because I have a feeling just going outside, and this is just a weird vibe I get, that we're going to have a kind of a cold winter. But on top of that, I was just showing everybody that, the ice on the poles has actually been growing despite what people have been saying since 2012. More and more record-breaking ice events have been happening. But if the weather did change like that, you might start seeing stuff like cold seasons without hurricanes. But I wanted to think about if the zones were different, you might want to set up a mousetrap, kind of just like what you said, which is really sinister, where you propagandize these large amounts of populations. Hey, it's hot. There's no resources where you're at. You were wronged in some way. Why, open immigration everywhere. If you come up here, we'll help you. We'll put you on social assistance. We'll do this. We'll do that. And this is happening in the entire northern hemisphere, except for China. And Russia's not doing that either. They're just not doing it. So everybody else is doing that. And like you said, all these military age men are the top demographic of people that move from those areas up, either for work, for real reasons, or they even had their own nefarious plans of occupation, which sometimes, if you pay attention to what videos that they show when large groups get there, they start chanting certain things. We don't have to get into that, but basically it's about replacement and occupation. But yeah, then say what happens if every year starts sucking where it gets cold, very cold, brutally cold, like it has in the past in Europe, and in the Americas too. We know we've had brutal winters here. especially during the time when people were first coming into colonization. They didn't know how to deal with these abrupt winters. It was even worse than some of the stuff they were used to in Europe, and they didn't have the food. So sometimes people would starve to death and freeze, and it was horrible. So if you imagine those conditions happening, and I kind of wanted to ask you about that. What do you think this winter's going to be, and what do you think the repercussions are? And this is I don't know. I'm not a meteorologist or any of that stuff, but it seems to me that if you have a steady amount of hurricanes coming from North Africa into the northern hemisphere and going to places like America, and they kind of dissolve when they get there and they do what they do. But what they do is they bring a bunch of warm air up into the northern hemisphere. So what happens if all of these storms stop coming so often, and every once in a while you get a monster storm or something, but you don't have a bunch of the little storms continually bringing the warm air up into the northern hemisphere? To me, I mean, like I said, I'm not a meteorologist or anything, but I would think that it would eventually incrementally start getting colder year by year with less storms, like a lot of storms like we've seen in the past. Like this year, there hasn't even been a named storm. They're watching one off the coast of Africa. But what happens if Africa is no longer dry in North Africa and starts being more humid, more rain, more production? Because that's what happens. We know whenever you start growing large amounts of plants, is that the moisture level starts to go up and the humidity level. And that's actually why they think it disappeared, because that primitive humans were going across grazing and burning and things, and it became less moist over time. I don't know if that's the truth or not. It may have factored in. But if you reverse that and start grow zones, you would think that the opposite would happen, that moisture would. What would those big storms look like coming off of there with even more moisture and heat off of the equator coming up to a colder northern hemisphere?
More snow. And you got to think about the eruption down there at Tonga back in February. Think about that for just a second. It was the largest eruption, at least in the last 200 years. Now, Mount Tambora in 1815 is and was more of a volcanic ash ejector right on the equator, immediately going over both sides and both hemispheres. So it's a little bit different in comparison, but the Tonga eruption was over water, the amount of water vapor and ash going up went to the mesosphere, 87 kilometers into the sky. That's about 50 miles plus up. So Pinatubo, even at its vastest, was 35 miles up. So think about the comparison of max ash cloud ejecta from Pinatubo, which cooled our planet like 0.7 of a degree, went 35 miles into the atmosphere. Where a little bit further south, 20 degrees south latitude, Tonga erupted and took ash and water vapor 50 miles up. Now that is circulating across the entire planet at the moment. Perhaps that's one of the reasons that the amount of hurricanes in America, there's been no hurricanes this year. And you have to go back to 1941 to come back in records to find a hurricane season in the Atlantic that has not had any hurricanes from the beginning of the season up to the 1st of September. But now you're talking about a different set of input and variables. We got a weakening magnetic field. We got a global ash event happening. Now it's going to be centered more in the southern hemisphere because it was, again, 20 degrees south latitude instead of being on the equator. And that is a huge difference, the way cloud cells circulate ash. So southern hemisphere is experiencing an enormous amount of cold and snow events. I mean, you got to look at the number of snow events across the southern hemisphere. And I've been doing them a lot in the videos. Record snows for everything you can possibly measure across New Zealand and Australia, especially down in Tasmania, Tassie. And then South Africa with the brutal snows, and parts of Chile and southern South America getting unbelievable hammered amounts and like 10 feet of snow in a spring snowstorm. This is what's happening in the southern hemisphere. So we're going to get a lot more snow, and the winter is going to be a year without a summer light version this year, but I think it'll be really amplified and at its like heaviest version. Next year I would call for a serious reduction in southern hemisphere crop production. This year it's going to be greatly dented, but next year is going to be pretty much a write-off. Problem is all the fertilizer plants have shut down because of the electrical shortages. So we're going to experience the most massive fertilizer shortage next year. Now, again, these guys are thinking levels deep on how to get as much damage out of the same events. So understanding the principle of sending a bunch of warriors, that would be the resistor class, immigration up into Europe, one-way tickets. Okay, what's with all the immigration here into America? What's going to be happening here where they want to cull those, all, Americans and those who've come from different countries? However they got here, they're here. There's millions, way millions more. The same thing seems to be occurring here. Now, I don't know if it'll be electricity. It's probably more going to be on the food side of things, or I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm seeing this parallel between the two, which is scary to say the least. But if we do keep getting more water, we're going to see it this winter, how intense this winter is. And I believe it's coming in cold and fast too. The leaves already changed on some trees, right here in the back of the property. Like 3 weeks ago, the leaves were already changing. In the second week of August, leaves were changing color. My neighbor's property now has also trees that have changed color. This usually doesn't happen for another middle of September or so. It was like a month early this year. So I believe it's going to get cold, and the crop production moving forward and moving all these people into these kill zones pretty much. So it's going to be done with the electricity shortages across Europe and maybe done. So Ransom, I'm thinking like, how would they do it here in America? Do you think it would be with food? Because I think you understand my mind track. I'm seeing the same thing. Mass immigration, get up into the States, get out of Central America. Again, a warm spot. And all of southern Mexico and all those Central American countries, you could make that into a really big grow zone also. But I'm seeing the same thing. Get out of there, exit out of the country, get up there, get up to America, and they're leaving all those zones south depopulated as well.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. It's like they're setting up areas for destabilization in one way or another, whether nature's going to do it or just the political environment. Like I said, they've been pushing this whole idea of civil war again, and both sides pick their issues, so they try to pull the heartstrings of people. But when it comes time for war and other things like that, or putting a face diaper on you, they all agree. We've already seen that they're kind of in agreement behind the scenes. I wanted to show this article because I don't know what was happening, and you're pretty good at history. Exactly what was the situation kind of globally about 1190? Because they have this article that came out that was talking about the mysterious bodies found in the bottom of the medieval well. They got some DNA analysis off of it, and they turns out they were what was it, Ashkenazi Jews or whatever, and they're talking about these riots that were happening. So I kind of wanted to link that to now and other times in history, that it wouldn't take long politically, especially if you take away, things that might make people comfortable, like stability, cheap gasoline, food, heating, etc. And you balkanize an area of a country, which they've done in Europe and they're trying to do in the United States. They balkanize it and then give you miserable conditions that agitate the population, and they're no longer comfortable. And it gets you in situations like in the past that we've seen human civilization, where they start getting mean. They start pointing at certain groups and blaming them or not blaming them, and things get violent. So I don't really know what happened to these people that got thrown in a well, but obviously it wasn't very nice. But it's most likely that conditions in the area, Ashkenazi, I'm sorry, I always mispronounce that. But anyway, somebody threw them in the the well for whatever reason at that time, because they were different or not from there, or whatever the reason was. They had different beliefs. But it kind of shows you what would happen even if nature didn't take care of the population for you, which there's a good point when you were talking about that lots of people die every time when there's energy problems in the northern parts of the United States and Canada from either a small, mild amount of heat, like an 80-degree bump, as long as it lasts for several weeks at a time, or cold. And we've seen a lot of that in the past, where the elderly, the homeless, and et cetera, exposed populations, or people that weren't prepared for it, they just die of exposure or hypothermia and things like that. But this article kind of is talking about in ancient times. It was 1190, or that's not that ancient, but like 1,000 years ago or so. When things were rough, people were willing to be violent towards each other, and I think that's the factor that they kind of that they need. So if they don't have a massive world war again, where people volunteer for it or are drafted, they have to create situations that basically are the opposite of comfortable, and which is agitated. And that goes back to that list I was talking about, is start making everybody fear everything, fear this, fear that, fear your neighbor, fear of being hungry, of not being able to pay your bills, of the gas prices too high, of the person you don't like is in political power. But when it comes down to it, they make always the same decisions when they're big decisions. They leave you with the cultural arguments to fight over, while they are the ones that control the energy output, and actually whether or not wars happen or destabilization happens in an area or not. And you can see, if you don't use blinders and you're not trying to be biased, that it's been obvious that in the last 20 years, there's been a rearranging of alignments of countries, populations, resources, etc., all leading up to something. And it seems that we're finally in that something, and that's I don't know if you would call it a shut-off switch. They're calling it the Great Reset. But like any computer program, you got to turn it off for a while so that you can turn it back on and update it and make it new. And that's the new system that we're going to. And if you combine the idea of them just moving the grow zones, which moves the power of people, you would see why you would want to maybe reduce travel for people from certain countries, but then also allow people to come in. That kind of sounds like a prison. If you think about it, you're allowed to come in, but they really kind of fight you leaving. You got to wear masks, and maybe there's an outbreak of this or that. Some places there's always a reason why you can't go somewhere. And I've been noticing they're willing to destroy their own industries. Like, think about the flight and the tourism industry in the past 20 years. People, they fly when they have to fly now, and it's uncomfortable, and it's very invasive and things. And then you go back 20 years ago, prior to or a little more, 25 now, I guess, prior to 9/11, when this seemingly new world order actually started being implemented, it was comfortable. You could fly anywhere, you could go visit places, you could do tourism. There was war zones, but there wasn't the type of civilization restrictions that we have now. And then you add on to that, pulling the plug of the energy and the food. You can see that rats in a maze, and they've already done this experimentation. It was called like Rat City. So they gave them everything they needed for a long time, and still they ended up falling apart and rationing resources. Like, groups of them would take it, and then their civilization would fall apart due to violence. And it's easy to see the parallels with human civilization there if you read that study.
Yeah, I'd seen that one. And so the old black and white movie. So to answer your question, what was going on 1190? The collapse of the Yuan dynasty in China. Again, if you go back far enough, you'll start to see that the mandate from heaven's removed about every 400 years from the Chinese rulers. And the mandate from heaven is literally, they think that the emperor was some sort of god that can control the Birkeland current flow to our star. And that star in turn, if the emperor could control it in the heavens, because he's supposed to be a god, that the food would continually grow, the harvest would come, the rains would come on time. And they called it the mandate from heaven. So the people gave the emperor authority to rule. Well, once the things started to change drastically, where there were droughts and famines and things, they're like, hey, emperor, thought you could control the sun up there, man. Oh, sorry, I can't right now. Okay, you no longer have the right to rule. And they called the mandate from heaven being removed. That happened in 1190. That was a full collapse of the Yuan dynasty during famine and drought at that time. Same thing we're seeing right now. I did a full hour on this one. The famines and the droughts that historically have been through China, what they're seeing right now is a light version of what has occurred in history. So this one's I wouldn't even say like on a scale of 1 to 10, the one we're seeing now, and there's like, oh, the things are dried up, and there's not. That's about a 4 or 4.5 on really to the extremes it's been over the last 2,000 years in that area. So that collapse was all encompassing at 1190. So you're saying there was something else, another event on the other side of the planet that occurred as well. So see, there's validity of these dates lining up where even in history, this grand solar minimum wreaks havoc across the entire planet. See, that's the thing. The elite understand that this can't be salvaged, this current world, because this cycle is all encompassing on food production wipeout. And once you get that electromagnetically, the cloud cells and the jet streams are moving into unique positions that can't be controlled. So our plant and harvest dates are no longer assured. That's the same exact thing that was happening when the mandate from heaven was removed. But think about it. It was global. It is global. This time is no different. But you got to think the elite know it. They know it can't be salvaged. They've been through this rodeo before, as I've been told a few times. They've been through the rodeo. This is just another rodeo. Getting bucked off and starting over with history again. 8 billion, buck them off. We're going to start back with 1 billion. And whatever iteration this cycle is going to be, iteration cycle number 1112, who knows? But they've been at this cycle, they understood the cycle, and they're back at it again. So it's pretty cool, Ransom, that you pinged on that exact date in a different event across the world that caused famine, death, and all these kind of things happening. So where we sit now, the real beginning of it to the point where we won't be able to grow enough food on the planet anymore, purely and simply, where it will be a full food collapse. Regardless of everything, even I don't care if you had electricity and all this other stuff in your house, whatever. If this electricity thing wasn't happening, you would still hit to that food collapse wall at 2024. This is for sure planned. They're trying to plan the destruction because it would occur naturally anyway, but with no control, because people would be hungry, and they would blame the politicians like, well, you didn't tell us this 20 years ago. I mean, we got this guy Dave over here on YouTube been telling us for 8 years almost now about this. How did he know? You didn't tell us. He did. You know, we're coming into the collapse phase.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, you were saying you were going to be, is it Brighteon live TV is what you're going on? And I saw on some of your shows you were sitting at a nice studio there.
Yeah, I'm going every other week right now as a sit-in, and eventually we'll see where it goes. I'm super happy going up there. 2 to 3 p.m. tomorrow, Friday, every afternoon, 2 to 3 p.m. Let's Talk America. I'm the guest host. And I am going to be talking about Africa and the electrical shortage, trying to explain a little bit, get well-versed on where we're going, at least with the electrical markets, and how this is all intertwined through chapters of history and being a global event. But see, the Northern Hemisphere right now is looking at the Southern Hemisphere going, yeah, you got to grow more crops, man. If you can't grow crops, we are in some serious trouble. So there's some news stories. They still haven't even plowed the fields yet, and they're forecasting record production. You know, they're trying to stabilize markets. But Southern Hemisphere is going to come in so unbelievably under what the forecasters are forecasting that it's going to shock the world. You know, so Southern Hemisphere is already into the year without a summer phase. So we're just going to ride through this here, and it is just a repeat in history, and I'm excited to know that what is going to happen, and then seeing and validating that there were previous civilizations who recorded these same events in the past. And even you doing all the research on the canyon walls, that's all coming back again.
Yeah, we know there was some very hard times here in the Southwest for the natives. I mean, we know that there was times of plenty and times of nothing here, and some very interesting cultural events happening back and forth, people disappearing, reappearing. Yeah, so it'd be exciting to see what's going to happen in a, I guess, futuristic context to them, but technological right now. And it's going to make everybody realize that most of their electronics that they value so much, and the little social media feeds and things like that, really don't mean anything. Like you said, if the refrigerator's, looking thin, nobody really cares what's on TV and all of that stuff. So they know that too. So why not just turn off the power?
Yeah, because you're going to have to get out there and grow the food. So hopefully at that point, you will actually be working the earth every day with your fingers and your hands and exchanging that energy and growing your own food. Because there won't be the time for that. I mean, there will. Somebody will have to monitor the radio communications and hopefully have a base station set up or some kind of incoming radio signal, AM, FM. You need to stay connected, but that won't be your life. David DuByne signing off. Ransom, Godwin, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Revolution